Well, I'm never making a video on a video game ever again because these people are so miserable. So let's go see how my other big interests are going. Oh, we got a new trailer? Sick. What do people think about it? Well, that's unfortunate, isn't it? So the Lanterns trailer dropped a bit ago, and people didn't really like it. Which, well, I understand. But we knew that the show was super grounded and gritty when the show was announced. I don't know why everyone was so surprised. But regardless of that, yeah, this seems a little underwhelming. Now, I think most people need to realize that the majority of the backlash is not for the show itself. In a vacuum, I'm sure most people would agree that the show can be very good. But what makes people so upset is that this is not in a vacuum. It's supposed to be an adaptation of an already existing IP with a long history. Mind you, a lot of that history in recent mainstream media is very bad. So people, like me and many others, have been praying to whatever god is out there for a good adaptation of Green Lantern. And I don't think it's been answered yet. I still remain more hopeful than most. There are a lot of red flags, yes, but if the show is shit, we'll find out when the show comes out. At the end of the day, all we got was a teaser. That was 2 minutes long. No verdict of the show can be made with that. If it's shit, we will find out when the episodes drop. So have some hope. Be like Saint Walker for a few months. And if it doesn't pay off, be like Atrocitus on Twitter. Anyway, the main topic of this video is not to break down a 2-minute teaser. It's about what I would have done for a Green Lantern adaptation. And by the thumbnail, you might see some different faces than you may be used to. That is on purpose, because my ideal Green Lantern adaptation would not be of the staple full corpsman, but of some new faces. Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz. Now, before I get pitchforks thrown at my door and angry comments, let me clarify and say I'm not saying the staple 4 should be removed from any DCU story entirely. I'm not that stupid, but hear me out. From the one movie that has come out so far, we know that this is a very established universe. Guy Gardner is already flying around being a dipshit, and people like that. So I would just had Hal and John already be established Green Lanterns. Because if Guy already is one, it doesn't make too much sense for me to have a story of rookie Hal or John. From what we've heard, in this DCU universe, we have a dynamic duo and Brave and the Bold movie is already in development. If that is true, which it does sound true, we'd be skipping ahead quite a bit. Dick would already be Nightwing, Jason could already be Red Hood, and Damian is our current Robin, so that means Tim is out doing whatever already, maybe on the Titans. We are skipping lots of development that could be its own movie. Dick's journey to being Nightwing, Under the Red Hood, Damian's saga with Talia before he becomes Robin, those are all movies in itself that the DCU is just skipping. So I'm going to apply that same principle to Green Lantern. Now, this doesn't mean Hal and John are just completely sidelined. They would have their own significant moments, maybe a flashback, maybe a dedicated episode, maybe just in Justice League movies. Side characters have that too. Now, Kyle is a tougher case because his story is very awkward to adapt in a connected universe, because it's like if a character's origin story was Infinity War and Endgame. To have him, you would have to invest a lot. So I'm just not going to think about it, not my problem. Sorry Kyle, you do deserve better, really. Let's get on to the main show and why I would adapt Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz's story, being the Green Lantern's 2016 run, as the mainline DCU adaptation. First, it is to be acknowledged that I am very biased. If you scroll through my videos, you may notice that Jess and Simon pop up a bit. They're my favorite characters. Jessica is my favorite fictional character of all time. And Simon is like my 10th, so I would want these characters to be adapted more than the average person. The reason I'm making this video is I want to talk about something I really like, and I really like Jess and Simon. I've talked about them a lot before, and I'm doing it again. So why these two and why based around that Rebirth run? Well, again, this universe is very established. We already have a Justice group out and about, and the Big Blue Boy Scout is already well known. These two stories take place in a very established universe as well. Like the Justice League is a thing already, there's lots of Green Lanterns, a lot has already happened, so it matches well in my opinion. And the more important reason to me is that these two are just the perfect superheroes to adapt in today's age. I've made 2 videos on these two, and I'm saying a lot of the same things as in those, because I love talking about them. I've always called these two the Green Lanterns of the modern era, and I'm going to edit that to just the heroes of the modern era. They are such fresh faces that audiences would love and relate to. Jessica is an anxiety-ridden woman who struggles mightily with mental health and overcoming her past trauma. Simon is a man who has been faced with the heaviest form of racism and prejudice, and struggles with trusting himself and the world after. Those are such applicable experiences to audiences today. Look how many people loved the Superman movie, how many people felt seen, how many people felt hopeful. These two did the exact same thing, and I might even say more, because people would relate much more directly with Jess and Simon. Also, the name Green Lantern has just been dragged through the mud for so long at this point. The main staples, they just might be too tarnished. Now you might be saying, well, Snyder tarnished the other heroes and they seem to be bouncing back. Well, Superman and Batman are such big names that I don't think they can ever be tarnished that much. Same with Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man movies did not tarnish that character that much. And Wonder Woman seems to be pretty tarnished considering the fact that people seriously believe she isn't on the superhero Mount Rushmore. So if she can't bounce back, well, I don't think Hal has a great chance. Granted, she hasn't had a new movie or show since, but the point is, Green Lantern has been through the ringer. We need fresh faces to rejuvenate the IP. These new faces may also create a spotlight for the old ones, in prequels and whatnot. In addition, Green Lantern is supposed to be not grounded. I've said before that Lanterns can be good with this grounded twist, and I still believe that. But in the end, the Green Lanterns are space cops. A lot of people are wanting a more Star Wars vibe rather than True Detective. And this is not to say they have to always be in space. A lot of Green Lantern stories take place on Earth, but these Earth stories still aren't grounded. It's still very bright, very grand. Think the Superman movie. Green Lantern should have a similar, if not less grounded vibe than that. Many Star Wars stories as well are centered around one planet, but still have that sci-fi feel. So what superhero group is the most like Star Wars and maybe has had success we can base it off that? That's right, the Guardians of the Galaxy. And who made those movies? Oh, the person who runs DC movies? Seems like we have a great match. Now of course, Guardians was a movie trilogy and this hypothetical adaptation would be a TV show, but why do people love Guardians? A big part of it has to do with that space adventure. The universe Guardians created was very fun and captured that Star Wars-esque feeling. But what's the actual reason people love this line of movies? It's the characters. They're so much fun to watch, and can be gut-wrenchingly emotional. They are incredibly easy to root for, and also someone like Star-Lord has an aspect of relatability. So what if I told you there are two characters that are even more relatable than the Guardians, as much if not more fun to watch, and incredibly emotional as well? Well, those two are Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz, and that Rebirth run they headlined in really had that Guardians-esque vibe. Now of course, I'm sure the other Lanterns have plenty of stories like this. In fact, an even lesser known Lantern, Sojourner Mullion, headlines in a run called Far Sector. While I haven't read it, from what I've heard this is even more sci-fi Guardians. And I'd love to see this adapted as well, but that's for another time, when I've read it, and maybe I'll make a video then. But let's get into how to adapt my two favorite characters, and there's immediately some trouble. Like with Kyle Rayner, these two's origins take place in fairly significant events, which would probably require a whole other movie or shows first. So we're gonna have two options. Option A is just to adapt those fairly significant events and then choose our characters there, or option B, which I'll go over, is to tweak the timing and some aspects to the origin stories. Superhero movies make changes from the comics all the time, while some, like the Snyderverse, are terrible and ruin the characters, others improve the characters and make them better. The two best examples are the before mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy and Miles Morales from the Spider-Verse movies. They are not much like their comic counterparts, and clearly that was for the better. What made those changes work so well is that they were first fairly lesser known characters, so changing stuff about them isn't as big of a deal as changing someone like Superman, and the changes fit perfectly in their respective stories. Jess and Simon fit both of these categories. However, I'm gonna try to not change much about the core characters, like how they act and whatnot, because I really like them. But I will change some things for the sake of this new universe. The biggest thing I'll change is the origin stories a little, so let's get into those now. Both of these characters have really intriguing and interesting origin stories, among my favorite in all of superhero stuff. Jessica's is one day her and her friends being her ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend, which tough scenes man, went on a hunting trip. On that hunting trip, all of her friends got murdered by mobsters. She'd be the only survivor, leaving her completely traumatized. She'd lock herself in her apartment for years due to PTSD and agoraphobia. One day in that apartment, the Ring of Othium, which is an evil Green Lantern ring, targeted her and she became Power Ring. At first she couldn't control it, but after an incredible moment with Batman, she overcame it and actually was in the Justice League as Power Ring. During Darkseid War, she'd sacrifice herself and seemingly would seem dead, before a Green Lantern ring would come in to choose her, seeing her overcome that fear. Pretty crazy and really good. Simon's origin story is that he was facing severe financial trouble and heavy discrimination due to his heritage in a post 9/11 America. He couldn't find a job, so he would start carjacking. One day he sold a wrong car that had bombs already planted, and he was immediately sent to Guantanamo without much due process due to his heritage. Right as he was going to be tortured, a Green Lantern ring chose him to be a Green Lantern. Now the issue with both of these is that they're in the middle of ongoing events. For Jessica, the Justice League was fighting the crime syndicate, the Earth 3 evil versions of them, and that's why the Ring of Othium was able to choose her. For Simon, there's a whole Lantern War thing going on, and she'd immediately be sent out to fight in it. If we were going to do a standalone adaptation for these two without prior setup from other movies or shows, this is an awkward situation. What I would do for Jessica is first just remove the crime syndicate. They already did that with Ultraman in the Superman movie, so we do have precedent. Just call it the Ring of Othium, not that big of a deal. Now the timeline gets kind of awkward, because we want Jessica to be powering for a bit, it's a pretty big deal. But if it's about the Rebirth story, we kinda need her to be Green Lantern. This is why I think she should just be introduced in another show or series first, then do this. Same thing with Simon. But if it were to be standalone, I guess just have her be powering for like an episode. Now we cannot have her die in Darkseid War, so her becoming Green Lantern should just be her overcoming Power Ring, which I think is fine. If need be, you could do what they did in the animated movie Justice League vs. the Fatal 5, where she's already a Green Lantern and her origin story is everything minus Power Ring. But I don't really like that. Her being this subversive take on a traditionally overtly villainous villain is so interesting. Removing that kind of robs her of a lot. For Simon, I think this one's a little easier, because you could just remove the parts where there's a giant event and just have everything else exactly the same. Simple as that. So now we can get into the fun parts of the arcs I would adapt, how I would adapt those, and why those arcs. The first arc in Rebirth is the Red Lantern arc. This one isn't some world beater, but it is a very good introduction to this run and our characters. I'm not going to go over everything that happens in these arcs. I'm just going to go over the important aspects and moments I'd like to see. In this intro arc, it is absolutely critical to convey that these two do not know what they're doing at all, and they do not like each other at all. They're both very Green Lanterns. Jessica literally doesn't know how to make a construct, and at first glance they're polar opposites. Jessica is a socially awkward dork, and Simon is more of a jock. Of course, they are much more complex than that, but as of now, they don't know that. All Jessica knows about Simon is that he's known to have a gun despite his Green Lantern ring, and all Simon knows about Jessica is that she locked herself in her apartment for years. They don't trust each other in the battlefield, nor as people. That is the number one most important thing to be conveyed. The plot of this arc is, in all honesty, kinda dumb. It revolves around the Red Lantern summoning this rage tower thing. It's also kinda just not very interesting. I don't know how to put it. But the point is, we're not focusing heavily on the plot here. Instead, we put all the focus on our two characters, because this is the arc that sets the tone for our characters early on. The extremely critical, must-have moment in this arc to adapt is this moment where Simon was pressing Jessica by messing up, and her finally breaking down. She finally lets down some of her walls and is vulnerable about being a terrible lantern, about how she feels that no one trusts her, how she's useless. And Simon responds not by overly pitying her or kicking her while she's down. He responds by opening up himself, of his own struggles, how he isn't perfect as well, how he's much closer to her than she thinks. This opening up is so important. It's what starts this amazing dynamic between these two characters. And it is something that could be so good with acting. People would love this scene so much, I promise. After this moment, the two would go on to finish the Red Lantern fight, and another critical moment in Jessica's first construct being made, a flower under a bunch of rubble, like a rose in concrete, which Simon thinks is a bird? I don't know how, but sure. The fight ends, but we have one more very important moment. Jessica staying at Simon's house to make cookie things. Remember, Jessica at this point still had immense social anxiety, and she was about to leave because of that, but Simon convinced her to stay. We get a fun little sequence of the two using their rings to bake and opening up to each other even more. We see little by little, these two people who hated each other, opening and softening up. That is very important for the next arc as well, the Phantom Lantern one. The important stuff in this arc is again that bond increasing, but also how both of them are still not secure in themselves as Green Lanterns. Jessica believes she doesn't have enough willpower and is still consumed by fear and anxiety, while Simon doesn't trust the ring to be strong enough when needed, which is why he still carries a gun around. But ultimately, these insecurities get soothed a little over the course of this arc. The Phantom Ring is a ring that switches the emotional spectrum color based on your current feelings. When Jessica put it on, despite her insane anxiety, she remained a Green Lantern, because the amount of willpower to just be there in spite of her anxiety is a feat in itself. Simon also did not put the ring on, deciding better of it. This is absolutely critical to include and get right. It is a very significant moment for both of these characters. The stuff with the Phantom Lantern himself isn't worth mentioning to me. I didn't like him at all. The stuff with Volthoom though is pretty important for what comes next though, so focus more so on him rather than the lame guy. But again, we see Jessica and Simon really soften up with each other now, and we'll see that more in the following arcs, which is so very important. This is where the adaptation would hit its stride, because this is where the run hit its stride. My favorite issue revolves around Jessica, focusing on her struggles, how she has to try so hard to even get out of bed, how even though she tries so hard, it feels like she's hitting a wall. This is something audiences would love, because it is so very relatable. They would root for her even more. I'm already imagining the sad TikTok edits that I would repost immediately. Anyway, this issue shows how grounded Jessica's struggles are. Compared to catching a submarine in midair, getting out of bed is still a monumental task, and Simon just didn't understand that. He thought anxiety is something that goes away over time. Of course, that's not how it works at all. It's something that cannot be cured completely. It lingers, it sticks, it's that shadow that you cannot outrun. But Simon makes up for it. He goes to her house and makes her pancakes, their favorite food, a food synonymous with comfort. This here is why I think these two thrive so much in an adaptation. Interactions like this would make them instant fan favorites. The grounded struggles, but a more bright story. This moment was really the official milestone of these two genuinely being the best friends ever. Pancakes will do that. Don't worry, Simon gets his really important arc too, when we head into Gotham City. And this would be another fan favorite part of this adaptation, because while Batman is in it, who doesn't love a good crossover episode? But also, it's a very significant moment for Simon. This is where he gives up his gun. Of course, Batman wasn't a huge fan of him having a gun. They argued about it at first. They team up here to fight Scarecrow, who had Yellow Lantern infused fear gas. And in my hypothetical adaptation, We're expanding on that because this is really cool and was brushed off way too fast. The important part is that to stop it, Simon didn't fall back on his failsafe of paranoia being the gun. He fell back on what actually got him this far, his willpower. He finally trusts his ring, himself, and that saved the day. Then he'd give up his gun to Batman. One of my favorite moments from the whole run, and yet another potential fan favorite moment. Green Lanterns usually don't have the best time with Batman, so having this twist is really nice. Also, this moment makes it so that Batman was a heavy contributor to both our characters' journey. And who doesn't like Batman? Well, a lot of people don't, I guess, but you know, come on, man. You guys at this point might be saying, this all sounds fine and dandy, but where's the Guardians-esque moments? Where are the space adventures I have promised? Well, dear hypothetical viewer, I'm glad you asked, because from here on out, it's basically all that. There's 2 mini arcs that, to be frank, if they push aside a little, I wouldn't be too mad. That being the Dr. Polaris arc and the training arc. The training arc should still be there a little. Seeing Kyle train Simon and Guy train Jess was really fun, and it shows how they truly become Green Lanterns. How both of them found their Emerald Sun, worthy of standing among the legends of Sector 2814. Also, Jess punches Guy, an amazing moment. I really want to see that. Anyway, time for our space adventures. This next arc would probably be the last of this first season in this hypothetical world. It is bonkers. So Jessica and Simon get sent back billions of years in the past by a first ever Lantern Reupload. Remember him? He was the first Lantern ever, coming from a dying Earth. He worked with the Guardians to make a ring to eventually save its Earth. But it didn't go too well and he got a little overtaken by the power. This arc has Jess and Simon get sent back all the way back then and have them train the very first Green Lanterns to stop him. Holy fuck. And among these first Green Lanterns, we have a Kryptonian, who dies right away, a Martian, a giant beast person, a forest person. It's crazy. Also, Simon's ring broke in this time warp thing, so this is kind of a callback to the very first arc, to have Jessica be the one to lead when her partner is unable to fight, showing her growth as a Lantern, as a leader, as a person. Just the very concept of this arc is so cool, and seeing this in live action would be so interesting. There's not actually much more to say as they just fight Volthoom. It's not some masterpiece of a plot, but it is just so much fun. It really has that vibe of Guardians, and this is not where that would end. So that would probably be Season 1. And if reception was good enough for another installment, this is what I would include in the Season 2. Season 2 will be focused on Jessica and Simon as people, compared to Season 1 being more focused on them as Lanterns a little. We start off with Jess and Simon back from their super journey, and this would be a very fun filler episode. When Jess is dragged along to a party, remember she has social anxiety, but this time she'd end up having a great time. She had fun with Simon's sister, joking around, pranking people, and even getting rejected. Unlucky man. This fun sequence also shows how far she's come. Remember how she was in the beginning? How her anxiety was still hammering so hard on her? Now she could enjoy a party. That's just so heartwarming. Simon would have a less fun time as his closest friend was really mad at him for seemingly abandoning him. Now, I don't think people would like this the most because it's a classic person is mad that a superhero does superhero things, but it's still a nice moment when they make up. But after that and some pancakes, we're back to our Guardian space adventure. A big idea with these following arcs is that despite these two now being excellent Lanterns, they still struggle in their personal lives, which is shown in their difficulties getting employment. Being a Green Lantern, fighting aliens, is easier than getting a job. That is what should be conveyed. They are still human. But also, this is where that bright space adventure would look so good if done right. Look at how vibrant these panels are. This is Green Lantern. It's beautiful, it's what we need. And Jessica being the corniest person of all time, it's just so fun, bright, and whimsical. That is what Green Lantern needs. On top of that, this saving the alien planet arc had a lot of cool power feats. Jessica held the weight of a lot of Thanksgivings, and Simon showed off his reverse curse technique for alien Miley Cyrus. The next arc is much the same, it's even more space adventures, and this time it's an alien civil war, where we get to see Simon have an odd romance with alien Miley Cyrus, and this is important for the very next arc. It shows how Simon really wants this romantic connection, and shoots many shots for it. I don't have much to say about this arc, other than it's another fun space adventure, like Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm saying that a lot, and I really mean it. Green Lantern should really be the DCU's version of that. Jess and Simon to me just have my favorite adventures. I have 2 more arcs to talk about for this video. These would conclude Season 2 and probably the series. First, we have the dating app arc. It features a superhero dating app being used to traffic and control superheroes. A pretty wacky concept, but it works. But why this arc is so important is for the implications of our favorite duo. We have Simon, who has been shown to really want romance and try and fail. And we have Jessica, someone who's been alone for so long she can't imagine a reality where she has romance. Isn't she so relatable? Anyway, it's shown by now that Jess and Simon have a very special connection. and feel very comfortable with each other despite their terrible life experiences. On this dating app, Jess actually matched with Simon. It was this classic awkward rom-com moment where she kept it a secret. So you might be thinking, oh well, surely they get together in this arc, right? Everything is leading up to it. No, they don't. They tease it so much, and then it ends off with saying Simon just needs to be alone for a bit. Even though over this arc he realized that the person he was looking for wasn't alien Miley Cyrus or the superhero he matched with, but Jessica. And Jessica realized that the only person who made her believe she can be with someone is Simon. And through that, we get nothing. So here's a significant change. They're just gonna get together. That's what we're doing. Now, I don't have a problem with them being platonic. I have a problem with them being platonic and this arc existing. This arc's sole purpose should be for them to get together, but it's not for some reason. And audiences love romance. I love romance. I'd make a Jessica Cruz and Simon Bazzer amazing video and all would be well. The actual content of this arc is pretty straightforward. Another space adventure. Just make sure this revelation of their feelings for each other is abundant, and the rest of the story should have set that baseline. Also, add some moments for them. Because it's terrible and there's a romance that we don't get to see when they're actually together, so show an awkward date. Maybe a Pokemon night. Jessica loves Pokemon. I love Pokemon. More than a lot of people apparently. The last arc on my hypothetical adaptation would be of Jessica's eventual overcoming of that night in the woods. She still has not completely gotten over it because, well, how could she? And when the opportunity strikes for her to get closer, she took it, albeit it was entrapped by this alien darkness lady, where she reverted back to powering in this black hole. She reverted back to the scared and angry person we saw all the way in the beginning, wanting revenge on the mobsters, but Simon was the one to dive in there to make her truly realize how far she's come, how she's carried on her late friend's memories better than any act of revenge could, through her growth, her actions as a hero, and as a person in general. And she could bring those people to justice now, as she could get that memory back now as she's confronted it. Plus, in this hypothetical world, they're together, and I think that makes this moment even more significant. Throw in some I love yous and I wouldn't be here without you. You know, the cheesy stuff. I think this would be a great conclusion for the story for my Lantern show, which I would just call Green Lanterns by the way. Maybe the new Green Lanterns, it's a work in progress. Now I skipped over some arcs, and the actual comic run ended with this fight with Cyborg Superman and this actual Star Wars-esque fleet, but I think that these arcs were a little dumb, and if they're gonna do this, make a movie. Cyborg Superman is a very big deal in the grand scheme of things, so have him be somewhere else. And I didn't bring up casting because I hate fan casts. They're usually really dumb, so I didn't want to get into that. So to conclude, my ideal Green Lantern show would not be this True Detective type thing, it'd be a Guardians type thing. It's what Lantern should have been, and these two characters I chose are two very dear to me, and two I think would rejuvenate this dead IP.